What's been like the total top line sales that you've had?
Last month I hit 35,000 in revenue, and then this month I hit 41. I'll just make 10 really great shirts. When I saw your video and you were saying like 50 to 75 shirts right off the bat, I was like, oh man, that's a lot of shirts to do. I just want actionable items that I can implement right away. I think you were like, oh, they're all really small things, but I swear they work. And as soon as I implemented it, like it changed from day to night. It was totally different.
On the down days where you wake up at a point something ROAS, like I still like beat myself up, like, what am I doing? I go by like the rule of thirds. Like roughly a third of the days I wake up and I feel like I'm on top of the world. A third of the days I wake up and I'm like, yeah, this is pretty good. And a third of the days it's like total imposter syndrome. Like, what is happening? Like, why did I think I could do this? All right, well, we are here today with Alex Chow, who has been one of the top students from inside of WeScale. And the goal of today's call, Alex, is to dive into the story of you and what you have been going through since you joined. When was it that you first joined the community?
I joined in April sometime, I believe.
Awesome. So April, so now it's beginning of August. Math, 3 months?
Yeah,
4 months?
probably about 3.5 months.
Yeah. There we go. All right. And first thing I'd love to do is I talk more than enough on all the group calls is I just like to turn it over to you and see if you wouldn't mind telling us just a little bit about yourself and like your background before joining WeScale and like getting into e-commerce.
Yeah. So I'm actually still currently working because I haven't been able to quit my full-time job, but that's hopefully the end goal. I'm basically a theme park designer. I do a lot of location-based experiences like museums or team lab or like museum of ice cream, that sort of experience. I do the scenic design for stuff like that for a living. So prior to doing the pod stuff, I was in Universal Studios Japan working there as the like seasonal scenic designer for 5-6 years. So I still do that. I still work for it.
I don't know. Did I know that? That's incredible.
Yeah, I think you did. I know you have a ton of one-on-ones, so
I tried it. Okay, well, it's cool then. This is amazing all over again. That's so cool. And then what was it that brought you to like e-commerce or just print on demand in general?
Well, it was sort of the time when I was quitting my job and I was trying to go back to more freelance, which I did, throughout my career. But I wanted to just have a little bit more freedom and just do that exclusively. And I just noticed some of the jobs kind of drying up a little bit. It's not horrible right now, but I could definitely notice that maybe about 30% of my colleagues, they're having trouble getting work and all that. And even for me, I saw some of my jobs kind of dipping. And a lot of that has to do with, AI being able to do a lot of our jobs now to a certain degree. So I was just looking for something that might supplement my income or ideally just replace it so that I can start my own brand. And I used to work for a t-shirt store years ago when I was still a student. That was always in the back of my head. And I was thinking like, maybe I could do this too. I never thought about actually jumping in until like I saw some of your videos that, with some guidance.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue. And what was it that like finally got you like over the tipping point? Like, was it something you heard or like something that clicked with you in particular?
It was actually a job that I had that it ended up being like so usually you have an art director guiding you on what they want and sort of letting you flounder with like a concept piece or whatever. And this job, I guess they had some kind of fire drill going on and the coordinator started just shooting me AI pieces to collage into my concepts. And that's it. That was the job.
Wow.
And it was so horrible. And I had such a bad experience. So I was like, there's got to be something else. I need to start segueing into something. That's sort of what made me start researching. And I was looking into like doing t-shirts. I was looking into maybe doing like 3D maquettes or sculptures that I could do myself, manufacturing that. But just thought maybe t-shirts, at least to learn the business and, the financials and all that, at least would be a good starting point, if not the end point.
Yeah. So you had like kind of a watershed moment where it came to a head and you're like, all right, I'm figuring something out. And so then you turn your focus to YouTube where there's so many different options. I'm sure you came across like Etsy and merch by Amazon, probably watched a couple of videos. What was it about like Shopify and print on demand that drew you to that in particular?
I had a few friends that did Etsy and everything. Like they sold their own art and illustrations. And I looked through Etsy and I just thought it's so saturated and there's no ownership of it. It just felt so, I guess for lack of a better word, I felt like it felt like amateur artists posting items up to sell.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like it'd be a business and it's not something you could do full time. So when I heard that you can do Shopify and build your own brand, like the first time I heard it, it just made sense to me. And I just started researching into that.
So you went through Etsy, then Merch by Amazon. You decided on Shopify. What were like the first things running through your head? Like, okay, I need to learn this. Like, where did your mind initially go?
My mind initially was saying, oh, I'll just make 10 really great shirts. You know, I'll spend a lot of time just illustrating it myself, doing 10 shirts, and I'm sure it'll go somewhere. And if not, it's okay. It's just 10 shirts. That's sort of where the jumping point was. And then I started listening to a bunch of videos and, you know, going on YouTube, and I saw your video and you were saying like 50 to 75 shirts right off the bat. I was like, oh man, that's a lot of shirts to do. You know, and at the time I was like, I just don't want to do AI because AI is what kind of got me out of business, out of my field. So, but
right.
It's starting to change now.
You're coming
I'm coming around
to the dark side. And so you started off with 10 shirts in your mind, then you found out 50 to 75, just need to increase the volume a little bit. And then, so you get those, if you could just walk me through, so you get the 50 to 75 designs, put them up on the store. And then what was your next thought, or like, what was your next step at that point?
So once I put 50 to 75, I just started really focusing on the ads portion, which, you know, as you know, it's almost like learning a language. You need to, you know, I didn't know what metrics I was looking at. I was just throwing them up. I just saw on the videos what some people did, and I tried to emulate that. And I got some success in the sense that there were some sales, but I was drastically losing money. I think it was like 0.4 ROAS at the time.
And then was it around that time that we had our first call together?
It was shortly after that, yeah. I think I was able to increase it to like 0.8 ROAS, because I turned on Worldwide thinking, oh, that'll just solve my problem. And Worldwide did give me like, I think at the time it was like 2.2 ROAS, but my US was like less than 1. Mm-hmm. So it kind of evened out to 1 point something. And that's when I had my first call.
Yeah. And then if you wouldn't mind sharing, just like what were some of the key points that like we went over in the call, and then like the things you did afterward? Because what I really want everybody who's listening to this to get across is that like we do a lot of like one-on-one calls with people, but something that I found particularly impressive about Alex and his journey was how he came prepared with, like, he had a good understanding of where he was and where he wanted to go. And then he was starting to fill in the gaps of like where, you know, what he needed to bridge that gap. And then he asked all those questions. And then this was the key piece, the most impressive piece. He went and did all of those things. Like, you didn't just like hear those things and go, okay, all right, then just go back to what you were doing, which is like such a human response and like very natural. I'm curious if we could dive into that. Like, what was it about, whether it's from me or from anywhere, just getting like direct feedback? What was it about you or like your thought process that allowed you to go from hearing that to directly implementing it and kind of setting emotion to the side a little bit?
Well, at the time, I think I had a bit of time because I didn't have too many freelance jobs. So I knew this was what I was going to be working on. If it wasn't the shirt designs, I'm going to be doing something else in this. For me, it wasn't a question of motivating myself. It was more of, what should my action plan be? What is my priority? I just needed some guidance in that. So I think around that time, I knew the designs were successful. I was pretty confident in that because I had sales. I just couldn't get the ROAS to be profitable. So I didn't know which lever to pull. I didn't know if it was the ads. I didn't know if it was something wrong with the website or which part of the funnel. And when I jumped on the call with you and Meg, I think right off the bat, I said, I just want actionable items that I can implement right away.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I think you guys gave me like 6 or 7. And I think you were like, oh, they're all really small things, but I swear they work. And as soon as I implemented it, like, it changed from day to night. It was totally different. But I think...
And some of the... Oh, sorry.
I think one of the biggest things was you were talking about the mock-ups. Just changing up the mock-ups and testing them. So I think right after our call, I did like 7 or 8 mock-ups and I tested them all until I found the best one. Then I changed my entire store to those mock-ups. It took me a week, and it changed everything.
Yeah, and that was actually exactly what I was going to say, is that one of the another thing that was remarkable is that one of the things we pointed out was a relatively big project, and where a lot of people might shy away from that and say, okay, that goes to the bottom of the list. I'm going to check off like these little things in the meantime, and then maybe I'll get to that. Like I'll see where I'm at, which is again a very human reaction of like we want the quick little wins, and then but it seems like you did an excellent job of like tackling the biggest pieces first, and like you said, you had your action list, then you just worked your way down it. So after that point, so you implemented it, and then so it went from a mid one to like a mid two, and then after that point, what was like the next? Because what I also noticed, and you and other people that have had similar success, is you kind of like took in all the inputs and you had your action plan, and then you just like disappeared in like in a good way. Like you were still on the group calls and stuff, but like you just like went and knocked out the work. And not, like I really admired that. Like you had your plan and then you just like stuck to it. And I'm curious, what was it like about your mindset, or like on the days where you would wake up on like, you know, a point something ROAS after you just put in all this effort into your store, into your designs, and you're branching out into something that's completely new and foreign to you. Like, what was it that on those days where you wake up and the first thing we do was like check our ads, see like, am I having a good day or a bad day? And on those bad days, what was running through your head?
So the first few months of it, I think I really started this particular store back in January or February. So I was floundering up until I joined that group for a good 2.5 months. I just didn't know what was going on. Most days were bad. And on those bad days, what pulled me through was I kept thinking like, okay, I'm going to invest like, I forget what the number was, but I think it was like, I'm going to invest $5,000 and I'm just going to use this $5,000. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to freak out that I'm losing this money. I'm just going to use it. And at worst, I'll learn something. So that's sort of the mindset I was trying to put myself through the first half year at least, up until I started becoming
interesting.
confident.
So you kind of had the amount that you're willing to invest, and in your mind, was it kind of like it's just locked out, like that's to the side, like that money, it's not gone, but like it's already like earmarked as like it's going to this, and that helped you with like just whatever happens to it.
Yeah,
happens.
exactly.
That's interesting. So still though, like on the down days where you wake up at a point something ROAS, like I still like beat myself up, like what am I doing? What, you know? And like I go by like the rule of thirds, like roughly a third, just as an entrepreneur in general, roughly a third of the days I wake up and I feel like I'm on top of the world. A third of the days I wake up and I'm like, yeah, this is pretty good. And a third of the days it's like total imposter syndrome. Like, what is happening? Like, why did I think I could do this? Did you have a similar experience in like the distribution of those things?
Yeah. Well, the first few months before I joined the group and just was floundering because I didn't even have a compass. I didn't know what I was doing was right or wrong, or if I needed to give it time or what. Like it was completely a shot in the dark. But nowadays it's more like that, where I wake up some days where I'm like, oh, is this going to work? And some days I'm like, oh, great, yeah. 5 ROAS, man, I'm amazing, you know, and in between as well.
Yeah, I'm the best.
Yeah. So yeah. I definitely feel that a lot more now.
Yeah. And I guess within, like you said, like before the joining a community, like felt like floundering, like lack of a compass. What was it in the community that you found you got the most direction from? Was it seeing other people going through similar situations? Was it like group coaching? Like, was it anything in particular?
I mean, that one-on-one call helped the most by far, just because you were able to give me direct guidance and like 7 action items. And it probably made the most effect in that it was the most bang for the buck action items I could do. And the rest of it is a lot of group coaching calls as well. When I have specific questions, it helps a lot. But just being on the forum and asking other people, like if they had similar problems and if they had solutions, like maybe half the time I would usually get a pretty sufficient answer that at least would guide me a little bit, rather than if I'm by myself, I'm just guessing or researching on Google, you know?
Yeah. And I've noticed like your questions whenever you came, which I think this just speaks to your mindset. Whenever you come to the group calls, your questions are always like very pointed in like a very positive way. Like, you know exactly like what the problem is, what the question is that you need the answer to. And then it's like, as soon as Alex gets that, it's like, just like back to directly implementing it.
I mean, right now it's a little bit, I do sometimes have problems where I'm like, I'm not quite sure what the problem is. And I'm just kind of searching and problem solving it. And that's when I struggle a little bit because I don't have a pointed question to ask.
So it's like kind of working through like identifying what the constraint is to figure out what the right question is to ask. So would you say that you spent like a decent amount of time like before you ask any of those questions, like really thinking through, or what is your thought process like when you're trying to identify, like look at the business, how things are currently running, what's the process in your mind that you run through to like hopefully identify where the piece is that you need to work on?
So, like, just for example, recently, a little bit earlier this month, I just had my ROAS drop a lot. And just to problem solve that, I started looking into, the top of the funnel, which is probably the ads. And I started looking through, did anything change? Did the metrics change? The numbers, are they still the same as last month? Generally, they still were. So I started looking into my site and then looking at like the site speed and looking at the layout, and maybe the order of the products. So I kind of have like a mental list. I should probably write it all down, but I have a mental list where I just kind of check it off and try to see if there's a problem in there. Usually I'll find a problem if there actually is something to be found. But yeah, sometimes, I mean, I only know, so I'm just learning this and just started. So there's a lot of issues that I don't know how to solve, and I don't even know how to look for them or even know that there is a problem sometimes. I just know something at the end of the funnel, there's something wrong. So when that happens, I'm not sure what sort of pointed questions to ask.
Got it. And the thing and that makes a lot of sense. And it's remarkable as a side note, how quickly you've come to like that mental checklist. Like it took me years to like get as proficient as you already are. So that's amazing. And I'm curious, like, as you like look towards the future, like the next 6-12 months with your business, like what's your mindset towards that, and like where does your thought process go, and like your goals, and I guess kind of how's that shifted since joining like a community and having like more of a compass to guide?
How's it shifted? Well, it's just over the past couple weeks, I know there was one video call where you guys were talking about how the top pod businesses, they put out 5 new products a day. As soon as I heard that, I knew that's something I could control. And prior to joining the group, I always thought, oh, maybe there's just something wrong with the ads, just simply because I didn't know. I thought, oh, it should be working, right? But after I heard that the last couple of weeks, I hired a couple designers and I started doing designs like nonstop, just because I know that's an input I can control. And if that doesn't work, then we could talk about it. But everything else I can't control except that part. I can put out 5 a day, no problem.
So you boiled it down to what are the inputs that I have in my control, and trusting that if I control the inputs for an extended period of time, then the outputs will follow.
Exactly.
That's amazing. And that mindset, it's what I'm learning from this is it seems like you have a very logic driven, which is fascinating because you come from like a creative background. Like for somebody with your background and skill set to have like such a logical, like concise mindset to that, wondering if it's not even really a question, but if you could just speak to that, I'm curious like how that comes about. And if you've observed that in like any other areas in your life.
Yeah, I think I've always kind of been, I don't like to do work that's unnecessary. Like I'm a pretty efficient person. And yeah, it is kind of weird that I chose art because I thought about that too. When I was a kid, I always thought I'd go into like computer science or something. And actually I did for a number of years, and until I was like, oh no, I hate this. I'm going into art because I can express myself better or something. In a weird way, there is some kind of logic in art, especially when you're like breaking down a design. There is a bit of a flow chart in it. There is a certain piece within it where you do have to be creative and you have to like sort of think outside the box. But the rest of it is actually quite more logical than you might think.
Yeah. And I'm curious, was there anything like coming into like starting the print on demand business and like into the community that you were expecting that then it turned out to be like the complete opposite? Like maybe some previous beliefs that you had that turned out to be not true?
I thought if you just had 20 good designs, you can be successful. I never thought it was a numbers game. I thought it's whoever had the best skills and the best illustration and design would win that game. And I figured that would be the most successful pod stores. But just from what I'm hearing from you guys and the research I've done, I'm like, I don't think that's the case. It's because you don't know what other people respond to. You could have a good guess, but that was really surprising to me. Like some of the designs that some people respond to, just like text even, I'm like, people would buy a shirt like that? Because I wouldn't,
So you've had some of those in your collection where you like launch it and you're like, I think this one and this one are going to do well. And it turns out to be the complete opposite.
Yeah, generally, I think I have a good eye for maybe like, okay, this design probably will be somewhat successful. I'm not sure if it'll be a top seller, but it will sell. Like I can probably 90% of the time determine that. But sometimes there will be one design where it's just text or something really simple. Like it would just jump up to the best-selling list. And that would be, it's very, very surprising to me.
Yeah. And I'm glad you talked so much about like the volume of designs, because one of the things that we see, and I'm sure you've observed the same thing with people, is that the volume of designs, one, takes them by surprise, kind of like it did with you. But then two, it's the speed at which they're able to ramp up. Like I talk to people all the time and they're like, I take about 2 hours on a design or 3 hours. Like I think the highest I've heard was like they get 2 designs done a day. They work like 10 hours a day. What would you say to those people who are like they understand the need for like, I know I need more, but like, how do I speed up that process and like increase like the volume of designs that I'm getting out?
I'm wondering, I would ask the people that are spending like 5 hours per design, is it like a overly complex design, or is it just they're a bit slower pumping out a design, or like what's the bottleneck there is what I would ask, I think.
It's a great question. From my experience, at least when I'm like answering your question now, but if like when I would go really slow, it came from a place of, I didn't recognize it at the time, but it came from a place of like fear of failure and like putting out the design to the market and getting feedback. It's a terrifying like place to be. And like, cause that's the point where you find out like, is it actually good or is it not? And I'm curious about you, like, was that even a thought in your mind or like a fear that you had when you had like your first batch of like, your 20 or 30 designs that like you're a creative guy, like worked hard, you put like pride into it. Was it a thought or a fear in your mind? Like, what if this launches and doesn't go anywhere?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're like, oh, I'm a trained artist. People should like this, right? If they don't, what am I doing? Like with, not even with pod, but with my life, right? So yeah, it was a huge.
And how did you get past that?
I think hearing that you needed not just 50 to 75, but hearing you need like 500 designs ideally or more kind of got me past it, where I was just like, it doesn't matter. Like people will buy things I don't think are good sometimes. Generally, I know if there's at least a decent design. So as long as it hits that quality benchmark, I'll put it out there. Like I used to have, there's a few designs in there where I actually designed a character myself and drew him out and everything. And like it sold kind of, but it wasn't one of my best sellers. And I got a little like, oh man, I thought that would be it. I thought I could make a line with that mascot and just make like 30 designs off that. People will love it. No, that's just maybe like, that'd have been great if it happened, but like, I can't expect that,
Right. And was there like a particular point in your journey where you could feel yourself shift from like attaching identity or like or pride to like individual designs, and that shifted from the individual designs to like the high level outcome and result?
Yeah, I think it was when I hit profitable. I was like, who cares? Let's just keep this up. I'd rather have freedom.
Like I didn't like that design anyway.
I can do my own artistic thing when I'm self-sufficient with my business.
Yeah. And how did that, diving into that a little bit more, how did that shift in your mindset? Like, you were grinding and working hard for like months and months, and then finally you have like your first day where like you look at the numbers, you're like, holy crap, I think I was profitable. What was that like?
I was ecstatic. I was so excited. Like I was telling my wife, look, and I had the P&L and everything. But I think it actually changed my mindset to a bad way for a little bit, where I was like, okay, now that I'm profitable, things are working, right? Don't try not to touch anything that's not broken. But what I should have done is, oh no, that a profitable day or a profitable week should have just been a fluke, and just continue doing what I was doing, continue doing designs, continue doing the ads, and try making sure everything's optimized. And I probably would have seen a quicker growth.
Yeah. So continuing to control the input even after that. That's great. And then what would you say to anybody who's like going through that period? Like you went through your, Alex Ramosi calls it the Rocky cutscene, like where you're just heads down, just grinding through, making design after design, haven't seen any result. Maybe you haven't even seen a single sale yet. Maybe you haven't even launched, but it just feels like, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. What would you say to the people that are going through that period in their journey?
I'd say just keep putting your head down, because even the smallest change, after you do like 20 small changes, it really adds up. There's going to be a tipping point where you're doing all these tiny little changes and tiny little improvements where everything's just going to like line up and things are going to work out. There's just one point that it happened for me too.
That's amazing. And when you have that point, it's just pure
Yeah,
ecstasy, right?
yeah.
Just over the moon.
Yep. Until you get
And it
until
makes
you
it
hit your next
all
problem and you're like, okay. And then it just
yeah.
continues
And
again.
then it brings you back back down to earth. Well, I really appreciate that. I think that's helpful for a lot of people. And I realized I forgot to ask at the beginning. So you joined like 3 months ago. What's been like the total top line sales that you've
Top
had
line.
that you've generated since
Like
then?
a total revenue or
Just ballpark. Yeah, just like total ballpark
so
number.
last month I hit 35,000 in revenue and then this month I hit
Awesome.
41.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Congrats,
I'm
man.
hoping it'll keep going.
That's Oh yeah, I mean, you have Q4 coming up. That's amazing. Well, Alex, I want to thank you for taking the time and for being such an awesome part of this community. Your mindset and I feel more relaxed just talking to you. Like I want you to coach me on Pro on Demand after
Well, we
this.
might not be
But
successful
I,
then.
yeah, we can coach each other. There we go. But yeah, I want to thank you. Thank you for doing this and taking the time. I'm sure everybody listening to this has gotten a lot of great takeaways. I know I sure have. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you continue your print on demand journey.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Thanks.
sharing.
Thanks for having me.